There's a couple new Nintendo Switch stories we have to talk about today, starting with the very first review scores going live for Kirby and the Forgotten Land, as it is hard to believe, but that game is out this Friday, and we have to go over what the first reviewers are saying about this game. Then the big talking point for today's video once again has to do with the graphical performance of the Nintendo Switch, new emerging technologies that we are now seeing implemented on multiple titles, and a broad discussion around what this means for the future of graphics performance on the Nintendo Switch console. What's up, Nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below, hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. Now, as I mentioned, guys, we got a couple different stories to discuss here today, and we have to kick it off with a conversation of the very first review that has gone live for Kirby and the Forgotten Land. As I mentioned, the game is out this Friday, which it just seems like time's flying at this point, but I'm ready for it. Now, that said, I'm not 100% finished on Elden Ring, and I still have to get the Platinum Trophy for that game, so I will have to be kind of splitting my time between a very relaxing and fun Kirby adventure with the hard grind and the sweaty hands that Elden Ring causes. But I will tell you guys that I am very hyped for this 3D Kirby adventure. If you haven't played the demo, I highly recommend it, as it does a good job of setting the tone for the style of gameplay that you can expect on this 3D Kirby adventure. And in case you're curious how it plays and you haven't had a chance to check out the demo, it is very comparable more to a Mario 3D World style of gameplay rather than something like a Mario Odyssey style play, which you may have thought it was Odyssey style from the trailers. It does not play like that. While you can move the camera around, it is more from a fixed angle, and the camera will do automatic pans and zooms and things that is way more akin to how Mario 3D World plays. That said, it is very fun and enjoyable, and my initial impressions of the game are all positive. But to kick off the conversation today, I do want to hop over to VGC, where they have a breakdown of the very first review that has gone live for this game. My understanding is that the embargo should lift tomorrow or Thursday at the latest, and then we will see things like the Metacritic scores and the broader review discussion. But this has to do with an exclusive reviewer from Edge magazine that actually published the first one, so let's quickly read through this VGC article together. First Kirby and the Forgotten Land review has been published. Edge calls the Switch entry a low-key triumph. The first review of Kirby and the Forgotten Land has been published in Edge magazine. According to an excerpt published in Reset Era, the publication's review reads, "Those who have never understood the appeal of Kirby in 3D are unlikely to be convinced by his move into 3D." It continues, "Otherwise, this compact, imaginative adventure is a low-key triumph, a work of great craft and wit that, unlike its lead, does not bite off more than it can chew and only leaves you hungry for more." The game received a score of 8 out of 10. The full review will be available in issue 370 of the magazine when it arrives on general sale later this week. So one thing I will absolutely commend Nintendo on with this particular project is, of course, we don't always see them do free demos for games. We also don't typically see them put out a free demo before the game is even released, and it's a pretty easy tell to see if you're going to be into the style of gameplay just from picking up the free demo, and you get to play essentially the first 3 stages of the game, and then you can make your decision on if you want to pick this up this weekend. I definitely will be. As I mentioned, I'm hyped for a new Kirby adventure. It has been a long time since I've really played through an entire Kirby game start to finish. We still have Kirby 64 the Crystal Shards on the way for NSO, and that's one that I will be hyped to play through again, as it's been since the N64 era since I've booted up that game at all, and I really do find myself enjoying good Kirby games from start to finish. It was just, for me, Star Allies personally was way too easy. It didn't do very much to innovate on the Kirby formula at all, and I found myself never really having that pull to want to actually continue the adventure and boot up the game. I even tried the co-op mode with a number of friends, and all of us kind of had that same consensus that this game is really just not that enticing, and it's something that maybe if you have kids, you can play it with them and they'll have more fun with it. But for me personally, I could not get into Star Allies, and I am very ready for this Kirby and the Forgotten Land adventure. So I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below whether or not you're picking up Kirby this weekend, and if you're going to play through it right away, or if you'll maybe pick it up and add it to your backlog of games that you still have to complete if you're anything like me. And bonus question, let me know if you're a fan of this free demo formula like I am, where you can essentially just check out a game, even in some cases before it's released, to generate hype for games that may or may not be a style of gameplay that everybody enjoys, because I definitely like Nintendo to continue this free demo strategy. So please share all your thoughts and feelings on all things Kirby and the Forgotten Land in the comments down below. Now, the other story we're talking about today has to do with the graphical performance of Nintendo Switch games in 2022 and moving forward, as clearly I think everybody can agree that the Tegra X1 at this point in time in 2022 is fairly dated, as the chip was originally produced in 2015, then sold in the base model Switch when it launched in 2017, and we are just starting to see that gap widen between the current generation consoles and what the Nintendo Switch can run and output. However, there are some technologies we've covered recently on the channel in a couple different videos, mainly around AMD FX Super Resolution, as it was spotted originally, or at least how I found out about it was from Nintendo Switch Sports, because there is a trademark crediting that AMD FX Super Resolution is being used in this game. And while Nintendo Switch Sports doesn't look like the most graphically demanding game, at the end of the day, this is a artificial upscaling technology that essentially will just allow for things like a better frame rate and better resolution with a lower GPU consumption when it comes to the power side of things, which is just a net positive at the end of the day. We then talked about the technology again when AMD themselves held a press conference, essentially saying that AMD FSR 2.0 is right around the corner, and it will deliver far more impressive quality when it comes to things like better frame rates and better resolutions, as we saw a Deathloop example of them showing us essentially a 50 frames per second 4K image and then being used with and without the technology, and they got that 50 frames per second essentially up to 100 frames per second with virtually no visual dips in quality, which is a huge deal at the end of the day, especially when you're talking about dated GPUs like the Tegra X1. And the great thing about this software, it is open source and anybody can take advantage of it. And while it is almost comical that Nintendo would turn to Nvidia's competitor AMD for some graphical help on a Tegra X1, you can actually do that because that's how this thing is designed. It can work on just about any style GPU out there that's in the modern era. And the reason this tech is back on my radar today is a few different reasons. Shout out to RGT85. He made a video on it earlier today breaking down exactly where else this tech has been spotted. He learned about it from Super Metal Dave 64, another great content creator on YouTube here. And then I actually got a DM to me from Pickle Fox 84, a viewer of the channel, so shout outs to you. But essentially this tech has a deep dive breakdown article from Square Enix themselves that it's actually been used in Life is Strange True Colors, and they really shout it out specifically for the reason that they can run the game in 1080p in docked mode, and this is the 1.0 version of this technology. So keep that in mind when we're talking about this, because for people who don't feel like this is maybe a big deal, I think that that is the wrong train of thought, as this could be the type of tech that will really make the Tegra X1 last until either whatever the next revision is that Nintendo is planning, or something like a true next-gen successor. But regardless of what Nintendo is planning with all of that, I think it is a very exciting prospect that games like Xenoblade Chronicles 3 could easily implement this tech and run at 1080p docked. I mean, Breath of the Wild 2, let's hope that runs at 1080p anyway. I definitely would expect it to, but you never know with what they're trying to bite off in terms of graphical fidelity, and you don't want to have things like really bad frame dips when you're playing a AAA game that you want to go through and explore front to end. But to kick off this conversation, I do want to quickly highlight the article in question here from Square Enix, where they have a deep dive on exactly how this tech was used. So let's quickly read through a couple snippets from the article together. So under the article here, under docked mode, the beauty of the Nintendo Switch is having the best of both worlds. If you fancy a chilled session on your big TV at home, dock the console and settle in on the sofa completely uninterrupted. Within Life is Strange True Colors, we have integrated the AMD FX Super Resolution FSR technique for when the game is docked, which increases performance at 1080p without a hit to visual quality. So I don't know about you all, but when I read that, it essentially is crediting FSR 1.0, not 2.0, for actually being able to deliver that 1080p docked image, which may have been something like 900p or 720p without the tech. So it's definitely beneficial. And then now the question becomes, does Nintendo just lean into this technology and maybe start to utilize 2.0 as soon as it's available? And how far does that really get the Switch? Are we talking about big differences, like things running at 60 frames per second across the board on the Tegra X1 as opposed to 30? Are we talking about always having 1080p docked games as opposed to the lower resolutions that we sometimes see right now? There's a lot of exciting possibilities with this, and while it's not a true up new GPU that is a next generation Switch that I hope we still get an announcement for sometime in the next couple years, I'm ready for 4K resolution on the Switch personally. It's still something that we can at least celebrate as a move in the right direction when it comes to the graphical department on the Nintendo Switch, because I personally want to be able to play games at least 1080p. I want to be able to play as many games as possible in 60 frames per second, especially fast moving ones like racing games and like Sonic games. And if Nintendo really does only see themselves as in the halfway point of the Nintendo Switch's life cycle, like they've continued to say in investors meetings over the course of time, we're going to have either some revolutionary technology or just a straight up upgrade to the GPU at some point in the current life cycle of the Nintendo Switch. So I think this is good news on all fronts. I'm definitely excited for the future of AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution, especially the 2.0 version, because I'm thinking that that's where we see the real bang for your buck and the real return on investment for this tech. So I want to hear from you guys at this point in the video, all your personal thoughts on both the stories we talked about today. Let me know if you're picking up Kirby this weekend and where your hype level falls for that game, and definitely let me know what you think this means for the future of graphical quality when it comes to Nintendo Switch games in 2022 and going forward, whether or not you think Nintendo will adopt this AMD FSR 2.0 tech going forward and really start to lean into better frame rates and better resolutions in the game, or if this is something that will be used on the one-off game projects and not necessarily a lot of first-party Nintendo titles over the course of time. So regardless of your thoughts and opinions, I do want to hear from you in the comments down below, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Make sure you check out yesterday's video if you haven't already, where we discussed the surprise Nintendo Switch firmware update that went live late last night that enabled a thing called groups, which is essentially Nintendo's versions of folders, and what it could signal for future updates on the console. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.